On May 2nd of 2022, a deranged mother of two shot her two sons while they were sleeping in their bed. Immediately after, the mother ran outside to continue her attack where she was confronted by her oblivious nephew. And with no hesitation, she drew the gun towards her nephew and pulled the trigger. But before we get into today's story, if you are a fan of the true dark and mysterious tales, then make sure to like this video and subscribe, as it really helps out a beginner YouTube channel like myself. So without further ado, let's get into today's story. This is the Teeny family. What looks to be at a quick glance is a charming family with two beautiful children. From the right, you can see Trinh Nguyen smiling happily with her youngest son Nelson Teeny, and Nelson's biological father and Trin's latest husband Edward Teeny. And of course, the eldest son Jeffrey Teeny, who was a child Trinh had in her previous marriage. However, behind this pretty smile of Trinh lies a grueling divorce process and a sinister revenge plot. Trinh and Edward got married in 2012, and when they did, they moved into a stunning 5,000 square feet home with almost 3 acres of land. The home was situated in the Upper Makefield Township of Pennsylvania, a beautiful and peaceful town located in the heart of Bucks County. The home had 6 large bedrooms, which would have been more than enough rooms to accommodate their picture-perfect family. The family had every sign pointing to a bright and exciting future. However, the relationship between Trinh and Edward began to waver. The tension between the couple grew year by year, and eventually at 9 years into the marriage, in October of 2021, they were finally officially divorced. Edward, now the ex-husband, had in fact actually moved out several months before the divorce was finalized. Meanwhile, Trinh had agreed to stay at the house and agreed to pay an amount of $2,400 a month in rent. However, Trinh had ultimately failed to pay the rent from June of 2021 to the December of that year. And after prolonged months of unpaid rent, with the amount accumulating to the amount of $11,000, she was set to be evicted on May 3rd of 2022, one day after the tragedy. And at the border of a pending eviction, Trinh had decided to commit the unthinkable, a decision that no sane mother would ever understand. Trinh had decided that she wanted to take the lives of her 2 sons, in large part to make her ex-husband pay. And on April 25th of 2002, just a week before the tragedy, Trinh had made a handwritten note instructing the recipient on what to do with her ashes and her son's ashes, forecasting the end of her demise. In her handwritten note, Trinh blamed others for the problems in her life, including her husband, or now the ex-husband, and even the judge who finalized her divorce settlement. The handwritten note specified that she was extremely stressed over the pending eviction from the Timber Ridge home that she was currently residing in. Police reports indicate that Trinh basically wrote a manifesto laying out every detail on what she was going to do during the attack. The will was signed no other than with her very own name, Trinh Nguyen. And after a week of manifesting the unthinkable, on the early morning hours of May 2nd of 2022, Trinh walked up the stairs of her large Timber Ridge home, in which in one of her hands, she carried a .38 caliber pistol. She entered the rooms of her very own children she had birthed, and took their lives by mercilessly shooting them in the head, one by one. However, this wasn't enough for Trinh. Her revenge was still brewing unsatisfied. And so she proceeded to wait inside her home several hours after the boys had been shot to target her 3rd victim. The 3rd victim was the nephew of her ex-husband who lived next door. His name was Gianni Melchiondo, and as he was leaving the house for work early in the morning, Trinh rushed outside to meet him. And because Trinh wanted to make her encounter with her nephew as natural as possible, she timed her entry to encounter him in a coincidental manner. And when they met, Trinh randomly handed him a box of photos and asked him to give the box to her ex-husband whom he worked with. When Gianni turned to face Trinh, he saw her pointing a black revolver right to his face. Then she pulled the trigger 2 times. However, fortunately, she miraculously landed on 2 consecutive empty chambers, and the shots were never fired. At this point, Gianni, having understood the severity of the situation and fearing for his life, quickly apprehended Trinh by essentially doing a bear hug and quickly disarming her. Trinh then panicked and frantically escaped in a white minivan, and it was at this time the police were first notified of the situation. And at 7:05 a.m. in the early morning hours of May 2nd of 2022, Upper Makefield Township Police were dispatched to the residence. And although the police arrived quickly, it had still been several hours since the boys were attacked. And when police arrived and checked up on the boys in their rooms, they were dying in their beds with gunshot wounds to their heads. Police on the scene said that they saw the 9-year-old son Nelson had some level of awareness or consciousness as he was banging his head, indicating the pain he was suffering from. The boys were rushed to the hospital and immediately put on life support. As the boys were rushed to the hospital, the hunt for Trinh was well underway, and certainly did not take the law enforcement long till they found her. At approximately 11:30 a.m., law enforcement located Trinh inside her minivan parked at the United Methodist Church in Washington's Crossing. Trinh was removed from the minivan and taken into custody with no further resistance. The boys, Jeffrey and Nelson, unfortunately succumbed to their injuries 3 days after they were put on life support. However, when Trinh was apprehended, she was drugged up with heroin, attempting to end her own life. And during her arrest, a second handwritten note was found on the dashboard of the passenger side of the minivan. And the contents of this particular hand note revealed the severity of the delusion that Trinh was facing. The note read, "Please call 911. My children are dead in their bed at 119 Timber Ridge Road, 18940. Indicating as if she was fulfilling some sort of responsibility over her children. And after many months of trial, the verdict had arrived. On December 20 of 2023, just about 2 weeks ago from this video's upload date, Trinh was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole for killing the boys and a maximum sentence of 10 to 20 years for the attempted murder of the neighbor Gianni. And all the sentences are deemed to run consecutively. At the end of the trial, after the sentencing was given out, the very judge made the remarks that this particular sentencing will ensure that the defendant will die within the 4 walls of a correctional facility for her unfathomable actions. And as for the 2 boys that had passed, people around him claimed that Jeffrey was an amazing swimmer, winning hundreds of medals and was also skilled in mixed martial arts. Nelson, the younger son, loved playing baseball, was an amazing skier, and had a passion for sneakers, and most of all just talking and playing with his friends. They claim that both of these boys were taken from them too soon, and will truly be missed by all who came to know them. And it's important to note that the primary motive of Trinh's crime were thought to be over her unpaid rent and her other related financial troubles. However, investigators revealed that she was actually doing pretty comfortable with her finances, plus the fact that she received a hefty amount of $200,000 from her divorce settlements. Also, in a handwritten note that she had written a week prior to her attack, she hinted the reasons on why her sons needed to be sacrificed. She stated in her letter that she feared her eldest son Jeffrey turning out to be like his father, and that her younger son Nelson was too naive and good for this world, and that she wanted to spare his pain.